whenever you put yourself out there to do anything, there's always someone that's going to try and bring you down because they've never done anything on their own. And so if someone wants to do something and they want to ask me questions like that, that's one thing. But if someone doesn't do anything and they want to I don't know, criticize, then I have no time for them. No time for them. So the person that asked that question, whose name will not be mentioned ever by my lips, I just want to tell all people like that, as I get back to safety here, that if you guys can't do it yourselves, you shouldn't criticize anybody else. You really shouldn't. Now, another cartoonist wants to have a problem with me or whatever, that's a different story. But at least somebody who's actually done something I'll talk to or talk about.
Hey, very quickly before the video starts, apparently if you ask people to subscribe early in the video, they're a lot more likely to, so I figured I would give it a go, as much as I don't like doing this. But if you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing, it would really mean a lot to me, and now we're on to your regularly scheduled programming. It's very nice to know that no matter our differences, no matter how much we might fight and disagree here on ye olde internet, we can all collectively come together to dunk on Butch Hartman. Most people probably already know who he is and why most people dislike him, but to briefly catch you up, he was a large creator in making popular Nickelodeon shows like The Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom, and if you are a woman-loving woman who watched Danny Phantom at a young age, there is a roughly 75% chance that your first sexual awakening was one of the female characters from the show, and we have Butch Hartman to thank for that. Now, our good friend Butch has come under a lot of fire for a variety of things, including tracing commissions that he charges hundreds of dollars for, starting a fundraiser for his own network that he never delivered on and just ran with the money, stating that he can't be criticized by people unless they've been successful in the industry, and being the type of fundamentalist Christian who believes that you can cure diseases and conditions like autism through the power of prayer. And if that doesn't work, you just must not love Jesus enough. You get it. Overall, a general jerk. Though another thing people have ever so respectfully pointed out to him has been his very wonky art, both of known characters as well as some of his own OCs that exist within the universe of the shows and may have appeared had those shows continued past where they ended. The most infamous of which is a video where he discusses some of his concepts for what happened in Danny Phantom down the line, revealing that Danny Phantom secretly had an older brother who was lost to the ghost zone. Probably a mercy that the show ended when it did, honestly. Pretty much every design and character in this video is not good for at least one reason or another. There's a good video that explains all of this in a lot more detail why, I will link it down below, but the worst character by far in this video is Misery Vex, because wow, this is just an absolute mess of a character design. Just looking at the head, there are so many questions raised that do not need to be raised. I didn't even notice until I went in on Photoshop to cut her out for the thumbnail of this video, but she has hair. It's green and just completely blended in with all of the rest of the green on her, but I thought that she didn't have hair and these purple tendril things were what she had, sort of like a Twi'lek from Star Wars. But if she does have hair, then what are these? They're not symmetrical and clearly have an organic shape and flow to them, and they're the same color as her skin, so they shouldn't be horns or part of the headdress. So what even are they? What's this thing around her jaw and this green spot on her chin? It seems kind of like the chin strap of a helmet, but there's no rest of the helmet, and this trapezoid that comes off and above her forehead that's the same color as her skin? It's not possible that it's actually part of her head, it has to be part of the headdress. But why make it the same as her skin tone? Why not make it all this darker purple color? Also this squiggle. I know it's meant to be hair, but what is this randomly drawn squiggle? Like, once you notice it, it is so distracting. And this isn't even a design flaw so much as just a very strange drawing choice, but Butch is pretty notorious for those, so I don't know exactly what else I expected. Looking at the rest of her, Butch really wanted you to know that she is meant to have a spider motif. Given the 3 literal spiders he plasters on her, I guess the one on her chest is a bit more abstract, so we'll call it 2.5 literal spiders. She's overly designed and has a lot of unnecessary details and additions that only distract and raise questions, and those are things that you never want to do when designing a character. Like the way too thick and uneven webbing in her cape, or nearly everything happening from the neck up. Typically, a good rule of thumb for character design is that you want the design to draw attention to the head, or potentially the chest and then up to the head, basically just the head, as that is typically the most important part of the character. But here the overall design is so overwhelmed that the eye gets drawn to the crotch, and even the lines of the cape reinforce the eyes to follow to this area. This is all especially bad when you consider that this character was meant to be in Danny Phantom, which generally has pretty simplified shapes and designs for its characters. Of course, you can still have details, but you can't have so many things going on to the point that you have questions about what you're even looking at, especially in something that is going to be highly stylized. And because of that, it seems really hard to imagine how this design, as Butch drew it, would translate well into Danny Phantom at all, never mind that this design is lacking a pretty key part of general design: appeal, which is just how nice a character is to look at. A good bit of that might just be Butch's drawing style, as you can see the unevenness and wonky shapes rather than the precise lines and shapes that are so iconic to cartoons, and it makes the whole drawing feel a little bit off. This all doesn't mean that every single thing here is wrong, and I like to try to keep some elements of the original design concept in my redesigns. So what generally is okay here, and what do I want to keep when I go and do my design? The color scheme is fine, especially for a villain character. Green and purple with a touch of red is a classic villain palette, though I think there is just too much of this bright green. It overwhelms the eye and it's not enough contrast, and I also ended up using the red even more selectively than the original. A spider motif is a fine idea, and there is a lot of creative things you can do with it without literally just putting spiders on her and a webbing pattern on the cape and calling it a day. And just as an overall vibe, she's clearly meant to be some type of sorceress character, and I wanted to keep that general idea with what I drew. You'll kind of see as I go through my drawing process some of the other smaller things that I kept and what I ended up scrapping. Starting on her head, skin color and the darker markings under her eyes I generally kept, though I did make the markings a bit smaller and a darker purple rather than black. I had the idea to grab these purple lacquer things and bring them up closer to the face and twist them into a sharper shape to invoke the idea of a spider's pincers. I also went ahead and simplified her headdress and added some red gems to it, framing the face. Since I kept the eyes red and spiders have multiple eyes, I wanted the gems to kind of give that multi-eyed effect. For the rest of her hair, I initially had the idea of a large and high bun with a small shape cut out, kind of like a spider's abdomen, but it just didn't really give off the feeling that I wanted. The large, mostly round bun gave her a softer feel and detracted from that dangerous aspect of her design. I was streaming while I was working on this for a bit, and someone in my chat recommended a ponytail, but I wasn't super into that at first because I was thinking of a long and skinny ponytail that also wasn't really the look that I wanted. So I was thinking briefly of just doing nothing else for the hair and leaving it with the pincer shapes and the headdress. But later, after I stopped streaming, I revisited the ponytail idea, but I made it a lot thicker and shorter, coming to a sharp point, which, while not directly indicative of a spider, definitely has a very insect-like quality to it, and it fits within the motif. For the bodysuit, I knew that I wanted to use black as a nice neutral color to contrast with the bright green that I wanted to use as an accent. And it ended up being a lot of experimenting and playing around with different ideas until I just found something I liked eventually. The first design I ended up drawing and coloring out I scrapped because it kind of just looked like a weird exercise uniform, so I went back with the branching design that you see in the eye markings and the headdress and kind of have that wrap around and accentuate her in select ways. Definitely some hella vibes going on in the bodysuit. I also went and made her cape longer like how it is in the original design, as the shorter cape I initially drew just didn't give her a very regal or powerful feel. She seemed more like a sidekick villain the way I initially drew her than anything else. I also made the interior of the cape purple to let the black of the suit stand out and to contrast with the green accent of the bodysuit. Having the green accent on the suit and in the cape like how Butch does just makes it confusing to look at, and it doesn't provide enough contrast for the eyes. I also decided I didn't want the bodysuit to be skin tight and started adding some slight protrusions just to break up the figure and add some more visual interest. Up on her neck and shoulders, I went with the webbing pattern with the line smaller and leading the eyes upwards towards her face. And it also added a nice area of more intricate design without being overwhelming and distracting to the overall design. The staff I also simplified and had it look more like a matching piece with her headdress with the red gem and the pointed green design. Now, obviously, I initially drew her a bit more in my style, how I typically do anatomy and proportions, but as a proof of concept, I wanted to try and also draw what I had done in the style of Danny Phantom to see how what I drew could translate into the show in theory. I had never drawn in that style before, so it was a fun experiment to try out. I only ended up tweaking a couple of things from my original drawing into this new stylized one. First, I made her darker purple color more saturated because I felt like that fit the cartoon aesthetic a lot better. And initially, I just forgot to draw in the black hands and made the entire gauntlet green, but when I did go back to try and add the black, I honestly just preferred the look of the solid green, and I left it as is. So here we are, my concept of a redesign of Misery Vex. Of course, I am absolutely not the authority on character design. I mean, a little over a year ago, I made this redesign that I don't even really like anymore, but a lot of people really did for some reason, and they boosted my ego much more than they should have. So I barely know what I'm doing, and it is a lot easier to start off from someone else's mistakes and ideas to tweak rather than starting from scratch. But I still find this a useful exercise in learning character design as somebody who does that for personal projects, both in designing something myself and in being able to identify what isn't as good or as appealing in design. I think my version of Misery Vex keeps the core of what the character is meant to be, but presents the ideas in a much more visually appealing way compared to Butch's original design. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know the redesigns are a popular request here, and I have more planned, but be sure to give your suggestions for what I could redesign next in the comments, and consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.